Hi, this is Mike. Welcome once again to Advanced Photoshop. This time we're going to make a web ad for ABC's Music Lounge, which is a really nice website devoted to music. And we're going to be doing this completely from scratch. This is the type of Photoshop work that I really enjoy doing because no photographs are used at all. But we make some graphics that look very photorealistic totally from scratch. In this situation here, we got the ABC logo over here, and it looks like it's kind of like a sphere floating in space, and it's got a glow around it, and it looks as though the sun or a star is just behind the little sphere itself, and so it's just peeking out from the edge of it. We got some lens flare here. We got some kind of nice multicolored clouds in the background, a series of dots on the bottom and along the top, and then some nice flowing stripes to add some movement to it, and some nice contrasting text. We've got ABC and thick heavy font over here, and then Music Lounge and a very thin contrasting font over here, so that we have nice contrast between our text. So we're going to go ahead and start this now. I'm going to start out by creating a new file that is going to be 12 inches wide, 6 inches tall, and 72 pixels per inch with a white background. Next, I'll create a new layer, and I'm going to call this layer Circle. And I'm going to draw a circle that is 2 1/4 inches in diameter. So I'll go to my elliptical marquee tool, and holding down my Shift key, I'll drag out a circle, and in that little window that pops up, I'll just drag that out until it says 2.25 inches. I'm then going to fill that with black. And now I can deselect. I want this circle to look like it's a sphere floating in space, so I'm going to apply a layer style. That layer style is gradient overlay. Now over here in my gradient picker, I'm going to choose, by clicking on this drop down menu, I'm going to choose foreground to transparent. I'm going to set the style to radial, and I'm going to double click on my gradient editor, which is this little bar right here. This is where I can change my gradient or create new ones. We've got two little color stops right over here, one on the left, one on the right. I want to make certain that the one on the bottom right here is set to black, so I just double click on it to open up the color picker, and we'll choose black for that. The one on the bottom left, we're going to double click to open up the color editor, and here I'm going to change that color to a light blue. Over here in the red value, I'm going to set that at 100, the green to 150, and the blue to 220. That gives me a nice light blue. Click OK. I'm going to take my scale and bring that up because I want this gradient to be larger. I'll just drag it all the way to the right till it's at 150%. And then moving my cursor inside my circle, I'll click and drag and place it up in the upper left portion of the circle like that. And I'll click OK. Actually, I clicked OK just a little bit too soon because I want to apply another layer effect. So let's open that layer effects panel back up. And the one I'm going to choose is Inner Glow. I'll leave its color to yellow, this kind of light pale yellow here, and I'll adjust the size to 15 pixels. And click OK. Now I'll go to my background layer, and I'm going to fill that with black. Let's create a new layer just above the background layer, and I'm going to call this layer Glow. And on this layer, I'm going to go back to my elliptical marquee tool, and I'm going to make another circle. This one's going to be a little bit larger than the first one. Now there's a couple of ways I can do this. I can just simply hold down my Shift key and click and drag a circle like this, a little bit larger than that. Or I could also just Control or Command click on the circle layer to load that selection, and then go to Select and Transform Selection and scale that selection up. Either way, just as long as I get a little circle, a circle that's a little bit larger than my original one, and I'm going to move it down. I'm just going to use my arrow keys on my keyboard. I'm just going to move it towards, the 8 o'clock position. So it's a little bit heavier on this side than it is up here at the 2 o'clock position. And I'm going to fill that with white and deselect. Next, I'll apply a Gaussian blur filter to it. Filter, blur, Gaussian, and I'm going to make that about 15 pixel blur. So it's kind of nice and fuzzy. It doesn't have to be exact, but around 15 pixels, like that. Then I'll apply a layer style to the glow layer. The one I'm going to choose is Outer Glow. I'm going to change the glow opacity to 100%. And I'll click on the color swatch and change the color to a warmer yellow. I'll set the red to 255, the green to 235, and the blue to 190. That kind of warms it up a little bit. I'll change the size to 65 pixels. Doesn't have to be exact, but around that size there. And click OK. Now I may have made this a little bit big. I actually think I did. My circle is probably just a wee bit large, so I may want to scale that down. I'll go to my free transform tool and scale that down just a little bit. I'm going to hold down the Shift and the Alternate key and click and drag that down about like that. Yeah, that looks a bit better. Again, I want that glow to be mostly over here around the 8 o'clock position, a little bit less so over here. Now the reason I'm having that glow heavier down here on the 8 o'clock position is that I want to make it look like there is the sun or perhaps a star just below the horizon line of my little planet here. And so it's going to be brighter here towards the horizon line on this side than it is over here. And I'm going to make that little star using my gradient tool. So I'm going to set my foreground color to white if it's not there already. Choose the gradient tool. And still on my glow layer, I'm going to draw a small gradient right at that 8 o'clock position, starting right at the horizon line, right over here. I'll just click and drag out a little ways like that, just to make it a little bit brighter down over there. About like that. Next, to make it really look convincing, I'll add a lens flare right on top of that little star that I just painted. Let's go to our top layer, which is the circle layer, make it active, and then I'll create a new layer just above that, which I will call lens flare. And I'm going to fill this layer with black. Now, before I actually do this, I want to explain what I'm doing here. Before I can put the lens flare filter on it, I have to have pixels there, otherwise the lens flare won't show up. So I'm going to fill it with black, but then I'm going to hide the black pixels so that only the lens flare remains visible. So let's fill that with black paint. Completely fill it with black, obviously hiding everything beneath it. But I'm going to change the blending mode to screen, because screen ignores black pixels. They're still there, we just don't see them. Now I'll go to my filter menu and I'll choose render and lens flare. And the lens flare that I'm going to choose is the 50 to 300 millimeter zoom lens. And I can position that approximately where my star is. Now I can't really see it here in this little tiny preview window, but I can kind of ballpark it, place it like right around there. And we're going to set the brightness to 75 or thereabouts. And click OK. And there's my lens flare. Now I want the brightest part of the lens flare to be right over here. So I'm just going to click and drag and move that lens flare right there on top of that star that I just painted. Now this is all part of the lens flare. And quite frankly, I find a little of that distracting. So I think I'll mask off some of that. Let me open up my layers panel again. I'll create a layer mask for my lens flare layer. Go to my paintbrush, and using black paint, I'll just paint over that a little bit just to bring that down, just to mask that off. Now that's subjective. You can do that or you can not do that. It's kind of up to you, but I just found it a little bit distracting. This is the main part that I want. And I can also scale that up and down if I want to. Go to that layer and free transform it if I need to. For example, I could, with the free transform layer, with the free transform tool, I can take this pivot point right here, move that right over to where the star is, like that, and then holding down my shift and alternate or option keys, I can drag that down. I can scale it up or scale it down to whatever I think looks appropriate. And press return. Now you may notice when I scaled mine down, I can now start seeing the edge of that layer. I don't know if you can see it on this video, but on your project at home you should be able to see this. There's a little line right there. That's the top edge of my my lens flare layer. So I'll go to that layer mask once again, and with black paint, I'll drop my brush size down here. I will just kind of paint over that just to kind of blur that in there. That way you don't see that edge. So I'm just kind of masking that edge off there. The next thing I'd like to do is put a little starburst right over here in the 2 o'clock position of our circle. So I'm going to create a new layer, which I'll call Starburst. Make certain that your foreground color is set to white. Choose your paintbrush, and for our brush, we're going to open up the brush picker and click on our settings options, and we're going to choose assorted brushes. And I'm going to find the one that says Starburst Small. I can increase my brush size if I want to. I don't want to make it real big. Maybe around 60 pixels. Make certain that your brush opacity is set to 100%. And then I come up here to the 2 o'clock position of my circle, just opposite the star, and we're going to click and add a little starburst. Now I'd like to add some color to the background. I'll go to my background layer, make it active, and I'll create a new layer just above that. And I'm going to call this new layer Colors. I'll press D on my keyboard to make certain that my default colors are restored. And I'll apply the Clouds filter. Filter, Render, and Clouds. Next, I'll apply a layer style, Gradient Overlay. And I'll set the opacity to 100%. From the gradient picker, I'll choose the yellow, violet, orange, and blue gradient preset. I'll change the angle to 160 degrees. Give or take. And I'll change the blending mode to overlay. And click OK. Then, still on my colors layer, I'm going to add a layer mask. And I'll use a large soft paintbrush. Go to my paintbrush, and for my brush picker, I'll just choose, let's go back to our basic brushes, and I'll just choose a large soft brush. Make certain that this hardness is set to 0. And with black paint, I'm just going to mask off parts of the colors layer. I'll set my brush opacity fairly low, maybe 20 or 30%, and then I'll just kind of mask off parts of it randomly. To create kind of a multicolored cloud effect. If any of it gets too dark on you, all you have to do is switch to white paint, and you can paint those colors back in there. It's totally up to you how you do that. Now I'm going to add some stripes that are going to give it some nice movement. In my layers panel, I'm going to create a new layer above the colored layer. Go to my colors layer here. Create a new layer just above that, which I'll call stripes. And here I'm going to draw some stripes. I'll just go to my rectangular marquee tool, and I'm going to draw, let me zoom out here just a little bit. I'm just going to draw a thin line out just like this, very thin rectangle out like that, real thin. And I'll fill that with white. And deselect. Then I'll copy that layer. Command J to copy it. Go to my Move tool, and I'll just nudge that down to make a copy like this. I'll copy that layer, nudge that one down. And I'll do this until I got several stripes. Doesn't really matter how many. I'm going to make about 8 or so of these. Trying to keep them spaced evenly. I think that's plenty right there. I've got 6 here. Mine are a little bit wider than than they really need to be, so I'm only going to have about 6. Depends on how many you want, how big you want them. And now I'll select all my stripe layers, and I'm going to merge them. Again, all I have to do is select the top one, and then shift-click on the bottom one to select all, and then I'll right-click and choose Merge Layers. And then I'm going to warp them. I'll go to my free transform tool, go to my warp options here at the top. Here's my warp options. And then I can just kind of distort these however I want, just by clicking and dragging on these control arms or any of the lines, the intersecting lines. You don't want to get too crazy with this or you end up with a big mess, but just going to create some nice movement here. I can rotate and distort it as I see fit. And then once I'm done with that, I'll just change my blending mode for the stripes layer to overlay. And then the stripes are kind of merged with the colors. And you can change the opacity of that layer if you like. If they're too strong. If they're not strong enough, you can just copy that layer to make them more intense. You can also add a layer mask to it. And with black paint, you can just mask off parts of it to control the brightness that way as well. Totally up to you. Now let's add our text. Let's go to our topmost layer, which is the Starburst layer, and go to your type tool. And for my font, let's use Arial for our font. I'm using Arial because it's very similar to Helvetica, and you can find that on both the PC and Macintosh platform. We're going to set the style to bold. The size to 96 points. And our color to white. And I'll click right over on top of our circle, and I'll type in lowercase letters ABC. And then I'm just going to position that right on top of my circle like that. You may have to adjust your tracking or your kerning. For example, I can see here that there's sufficient space between the A and the B, but the B and the C are touching each other. So to correct that, I would click in between those two letters, and then holding down my Alt or Option key, I'll use the left and right arrow keys to bring those letters closer together or farther apart. That's adjusting my kerning. Next, I'll go back to my type tool. I'm going to change the font to something light and thin. Now, if you're on a Macintosh, I recommend using Helvetica Neue Ultralight 84 points. If you're on a PC, we'll try using Eris Light ITC. I'm using a PC, so I'm going to change my font to Eris Light ITC. Oops, I forgot to deselect my text. There we go. Now let's try that. Eris Light and I'm going to type in lowercase letters Music Lounge. Let me set the orientation to flush left. I want to make certain that my two lines of text are lined up properly. So let's turn on our rulers. Control Command R, pull a guideline down to the baseline of my text, and I'll move the Music Lounge down just until it touches that baseline, so that both of our lines of text are just lined up nicely like that. I can hide my rulers, turn off my guide. I'm almost finished with my project. I want to add some dots just as a nice abstract element in the background. To do that, I'm going to have to create a custom-made brush. To do that, I'm going to have to create a new file. So let's do this. Let's choose New File, New. And we're going to make this new file 200 pixels by 200 pixels. Make certain that you choose pixels. Background color white, resolution 72. I'll create a new layer for this. And on that new layer, I'll go to my elliptical marquee tool. And at the top center, I'll just draw out a small circle like that and fill it with black. Deselect. I'll select all and then go to my selection tool, and I'll align that at the top center. Then I'll copy this layer and I'll move that copied circle down like this. I'll go ahead and center this one. Then I'll copy that layer and move the third circle down like this. Now what I want to do is make my circles to where they're evenly spaced like that. So they should look like a die. I'm going to make this into a paintbrush. So I'm going to choose Edit and Define Brush Preset. This little panel opens up here. I'll just give it a name. I'll call it Dots. Click OK. And then I can close this file because I no longer need it. I'll select my paintbrush tool and I'll open up my brushes panel by pressing F5. And over here is my dots brushes that I just created. I'm going to set the size to about 100 pixels. You know, doesn't have to be exact. This is just kind of a ballpark figure. And I'll set the spacing. Let me pull this panel up just a little bit so we can see down here. These are my spacing options down here. I'm going to adjust my spacing until those dots are evenly spaced. I can just kind of eyeball that. I want to make certain that they're evenly spaced vertically and horizontally. In my case here, it looks like it's about 115%. Of course, that depends on how large you've drawn your dots. Back in my Layers panel, I'm going to find my glow layer, make it active, create a new layer just above that, which I will call Dots. So the Dots layer is just beneath the circle layer. I'm going to change the blending mode of that layer to Overlay. And then with my paintbrush, I'll position my brush just to the side, off the edge of my my canvas, and I'll hold down my Shift key. Let me set my brush opacity to 100% first of all. Okay, then I move my brush over to the lower left, hold down the Shift key, and click and drag to paint a series of dots there. And then I can drop my brush size down. Now coming across the top, I can add another row across the top like that. Now I could also put these on separate layers, gives me a little more flexibility as far as editing them. I may want to move those up or down or what have you. And I place it behind or actually underneath the circle layer so that they would actually go behind our little planet that we created. And you can adjust your opacity to what suits you. You can mask off parts of them if you like. If they aren't bright enough for you, copy the layer I like mine to be a little more subtle, like that. And there we have our finished web ad for ABC Music Lounge. Now what your assignment is to create your own web ad using any product that you want to advertise. This is student work. This student photographed a Nissan Maxima, her own car, and brought that into Photoshop, and she added the lights just like we did in our rain project. She added and distorted the stripes, used different dots. She even changed the color of the dots. Instead of using white, she used different colors. And added some atmospheric effects, this kind of fog, which is really, really cool. She went online and downloaded the logo for Nissan and brought that into it. And using contrasting type like we did, she spelled out the name of the product. Here's another really nice one. This person got really creative. Look what they did with the stripes back there. Adding these colored dots in the background. Very cool. Little Starburst on the bottles of the shampoo or the product that's being sold here. So this is what you're going to be doing, creating your own ad using these same techniques, but pushing it further, getting creative with it, making it your own. Just don't duplicate what we did in the practice file. Take it further. This can be a great piece to put in your professional portfolio. So you don't need to send me the practice file. Just send me your finished artwork. Again, choose any product that you want to make an advertisement for. Make certain that your text is easy to read, that your message gets across clearly, and do some really creative work with masks, with transforming the stripes, creating your own brushes, doing all these really, really cool things to make your own original web ad artwork and send that to me on Blackboard. I'm looking forward to seeing what you can do with this project. This is Mike McCrease.